You ready? Let's do this. All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the GROklahoma podcast. If you're just joining us for the first time, my name is Dr. Mo, and I serve as the host of this podcast, where we highlight clinical and translational research in Oklahoma, the people behind it, and those who support them. So today we have a splendid and fantastic guest, and I'm so excited to share their story. Her energy is so infectious, and I bet by the time you're done with this episode, you'll catch the fire as well. So she is an associate professor of pediatrics, and she specializes in endocrinology and diabetes at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. Her research uses multiomics approaches to identify molecular biomarkers for environmental exposures in adult and pediatric populations, particularly in epigenetics. She's passionate about mentoring young scientists and has extensive experience in obesity, nutrition, and exercise research. She's been funded by NIH at every career level. On a personal note, she has been an avid runner for more than 30 years. She loves to eat, loves to cook, watch her kids compete in soccer and cross country, and read. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sarah Borengasser to the podcast. Hello.
Hi, thank you, Mo, for the invitation, and thank you for the kind introduction and words. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for coming on the podcast, and cannot wait to share your story. So I always like to start from the basics. Can you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and early life experiences? And I'm very curious to know what will have sparked your interest early on in what you do right now, career-wise.
Sure. So I grew up in small town Iowa. So I grew up in a city called Mason City, Iowa. And I didn't realize at the time I was growing up that I was part of a unique family, but I was adopted from Korea when I was 5 months old by a white family. And my older brother was also adopted from Korea when he was 5 months old. We are not blood related. And then my younger brother was a surprise. My parents didn't think they could conceive a child. And so I didn't realize that we were a very racially mixed family, 2 Koreans, and then everyone else had Norwegian and German descent. But I never realized that, again, I felt completely loved and wasn't treated any differently. And so I didn't realize from the outside we looked differently, but on the inside, it just felt like an awesome family to grow up in. And so was your other question about how this has influenced my research?
Yes, what you do right now. Yes.
Yeah. And so from an early age, I love to run. And so, as you mentioned in my introduction, I've been a runner for over 30 years. And so I ran competitively in high school and in college. And I remember I was a Spanish studies major as an undergraduate, which is very non-scientific. And I remember being at the gym over winter break, and a girl I ran cross country with in high school was like, "Oh, I'm majoring in exercise science. It's something I think you would like." But I was finishing my undergrad in Spanish studies, but then I did a master's in exercise science. So I realized my passion was exercise, and so it made me pursue a master's degree where I received training in exercise physiology and exercise immunology. I took time off from academia and I worked as a personal trainer. I moved into management and I taught personal trainers how to personal train. And during that time, I really saw how exercise beneficially impacted people's lives. But I realized I was missing a component to being able to more effectively impact weight loss, obesity, and that was nutrition. And so I went back to grad school and I finished a PhD in nutrition at the University of Missouri, where my dissertation project had an exercise component and a nutrition component. And that's what drove me to nutrition. But as a pre-doc, I was also, I became pregnant with my first child, and we happened to have 3 seminar speakers that spoke about in utero exposures. So what you eat, other environmental exposures, like it's well known not to drink or smoke during pregnancy, but I'd never thought about these other environmental exposures like exercise and diet and how that can impact the growing fetus. And so I was completely intrigued. So my personal life has certainly driven my professional life. And so I went and did a postdoc to study the developmental origins of health and disease. So how in utero exposures, so how during pregnancy, what a mom eats can impact her offspring's gene expression and other, I'm interested in epigenetics, so the offspring's epigenome. And so I did a postdoc in Little Rock, Arkansas, at the Arkansas Children's Nutrition Center to study that. And that's brought me to various places in my career.
Wow. I can't even tell by looking at you. I mean, you're of Korean origin, grew up in Iowa, ran Spanish, gym lady, personal trainer, and then here you are, research. Wow, what a life. What a life. So let's talk about your research. There's so many big words that I'm looking at. Multiomics, epigenetics, in utero exposure. In simple terms, especially for a fifth grader level, how would you describe what you do? And what are your short-term and long-term goals, career goals?
So I would describe what I do as I want to help people live healthier lives across their lifespan, whether they're kids, whether they're grown-ups, whether they're moms or dads. And the way that I like to have people live healthier is to eat healthier. So choose fruits and vegetables and a variety of different colors that you eat every day. And then being active. And there's not just one way to be active, but selecting an activity that feels good and is fun to do. And that should be at any age, not just for kids, having fun playing tag or playing soccer, but I think adults need to ask themselves, how do I like to move? And maybe that's the way I should be moving. I think it's easy to think that the only way to exercise is at a gym.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's just not true. And if that's the barrier holding people from exercising, I would challenge people to say, like, how do I like to move? I should be moving that way.
Thank you for that. I mean, it makes it's very clear what you just said. So let's talk about just obesity as a problem. It's a major pandemic. I mean, we're even saying it, not just in the Western world, even in protected places, it's become an issue. How would you say what you're doing right now, like your work and what your lab is doing, how did it translate into practical interventions that can help, against the scourge of obesity?
So I think it's more in the direction that I hope my lab will be moving towards in my research program. And so what I think I discovered as a personal trainer for 3 years, and then as an obesity researcher in exercise and nutrition, is that one intervention doesn't fit all. And so I think intuitively at every age, people know to eat more fruits and vegetables and to move more, but it's hard to do that. Or we can get people to do that initially and see short-term weight loss. What's challenging is weight loss maintenance. And so where I'm going is towards precision lifestyle. So how can we tailor diet and exercise more? And maybe it can't be exactly at the individual level, but at least to subpopulations of people or subphenotypes. How can we make exercise and diet more sustainable?
Wow, thanks for that. So I'm curious to know, why do you think obesity is just a big issue? And I don't know where I read the stat from. About 7 in 10 Americans are described as clinically obese. What do you think is the reason behind that? And a follow-up question to that would be, how can we go about fixing this problem? And I know it's not quite as simple. There are many layers. It's not just what people put in their mouth necessarily. It could also be some genetic factors. But why do you think it's such a big issue that is also spreading across the world?
I think so. In nutrition, there's a group of researchers that study, it's called the nutrition transition. So as you're talking about the global obesity pandemic, so as countries become more economically, as they increase their economic output, they're able to they're transitioning to a Western style diet. So drinking more sugary beverages, eating more highly processed foods. And then as technology advances, there's things that we used to do, even like brushing your teeth, right? Like most people have an electronic toothbrush. Like little things that have changed that maybe over time add up to, like a lot of little things can add up to be big things. And so I think there's inactivity in general, sedentary lifestyle. And so here we are sitting, in front of computers right now. And so I think it's some of these things that are contributing to the obesity epidemic for, highly palatable food being more highly available, being cheap, being easy to manufacture. It has longer shelf life. So some of these things are a necessity, but some of these things, I think we need to make fresh fruits and vegetables more readily available to everyone.
Wow, thanks for that. What's your personal opinion on GLP-1s that are making the waves right now? I'm sure you heard about the Ozempics and the Mounjaros and the Zepbounds and how they're just like magical pills. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's I'm maybe conflicted. So what I've also faced as an obesity researcher is that in certain cases, just exercise and nutrition isn't enough. And so I've also had to embrace that pharmaceutical interventions sometimes are most appropriate, but then I would challenge that we combine these pharmaceutical agents with still healthy lifestyle. And same with bariatric surgery. I think in certain situations, that is the most effective obesity treatment. Not across the board. And again, combining bariatric surgery with also adopting healthier lifestyle long-term. But I think, I don't want to call like a GLP-1 a miracle drug or anything like that, but I think there are situations where it's warranted. But again, I think we still need to encourage people to not just look toward drug as the miracle drug. And
as a miracle drug, I think it's the factor of so many things, right? So I have gone through waves in my life personally where I wasn't exercising, but I think COVID was almost like an eye opener for me. And I realized that things I thought were not accessible to me. I could just walk out from the comfort of my home. I had a gym membership, but I hardly used it, and then the world shut down. It's like, okay, you have to face yourself. Things you were running from, now you're confronting them. So that helped me to start building healthy practices around, moving my body. And I don't call it working out. I do things I love doing, which is something I resonate with when you said earlier on about it doesn't have to be something that breaks your body. So I like to swim. I like to do pickleball. I like to lift weights, and I like to dance. So I've stuck my routine to those 4 things, and it's bringing me a lot of joy. And it's also that social interaction. But I think what helped me to be consistent with it, because I was never always consistent before, was because I saw the benefits it had on my body and on my mood. Right. Because prior to then, I'll do all the fads, I'll lose the weight, but then it was at the expense of losing joy in my life. I was not eating the food I wanted because the things I liked were not things that my doctor said were healthy for me. And then being not from here, being Nigerian, our food are kind of very high in, very calorie dense. And, and I know how we did it back home. A lot of us weren't overweight until we moved to this part of the world, and, our gut changed. And I have this theory how when I moved to the US, it kind of messed up my, my gut and then all that. That could be a story for another day. But all that to say, I think for most of us, when we get to that point of finally losing the weight, realize that there's no more joy, and then you put it back on because you have to keep doing those things. So it's not sustainable. I guess my question for you would be this: from your experience, doing this and, even your personal testimony to that, what are ways to sustain a healthy habit around exercise and diet?
Making it a priority. And it takes some planning, right? So finding ways to, and sometimes it's small ways. So there's a researcher, I have a colleague at Colorado where I was formerly who studies short bouts of exercise. And she has found short bouts of exercise are really effective. So just getting up out of your desk, out of your office and, walking, a short bout of like 1 or 2 minutes of walking. So I think we all have different barriers that we put up, right? And so it's planning. So I guess I can give a personal testimony. So I realized today was a busy day for me. And so I knew I had to work out in the morning before I came here in order to do it. So I had to plan with my kids even. I had to tell my daughter, Dad's going to be taking your brother to school. I might be working out. So if you need something, you need to go wake up your oldest brother, but you're okay. Someone's here for you. And I had to tell my 16-year-old, hey, Dad's taking, Bo to school. I'm going to be working out. Everly may come wake you up. And so then just planning it, being intentional, knowing I couldn't do my full workout. I had to do an abbreviated workout, but I thought any workout's better than no. And I think that's another thing that as exercise physiologists, I'm part of a study that's looking at the timing of exercise, like morning versus evening exercise. But what we would still tell you is anytime you can find time to move is when you should move. So whether that be in the morning, in the evening, at lunch, after school with your kids, that's when you should move, is just when you have time. And then for the diet piece, I have to pick out recipes in advance. So before I make my grocery list, I have to pick out, we have this binder full of recipes we like. We go through it, we pull out those. And then when we make our grocery lists, like on our phones, we have to go down the ingredient list of those recipes. So I think it takes a little planning, but it's worth it.
That's worth it. Yeah. There's this thing I strongly believe in. Exercise is good. I mean, you want to have good muscle tone and, be able to move around and get all of that locomotion in. But diet is really what pushes that, inflection point when it comes to losing weight and maintaining it. So I would say my theory is diet is like 70-80% and exercise is 20%, 30%. It's still important, but diet is a major component. Do you think that's true?
I don't know if I can break it down to percentages, and I think it varies for each individual. So I hate to break it down to a number.
You're such a scientist.
But I would say that both exercise and nutrition have pleiotropic effects. So they have many effects on one's body and mind, as you were attesting to as well. So I remember the study in grad school. It was done at Pennington. It showed that postmenopausal women who exercised as little as 17 minutes a day, they weren't seeing weight loss, but at 17 minutes, but they felt better, like their mental health was better. So they did some validated questionnaires to show that their mental health was improved. And they did see small improvements in their cardiometabolic outcomes. And I can't recall from that study, this was again taking me back several years ago to grad school, but I remember there being like just weight loss. They didn't see weight loss, but they saw these other effects just by a mild dose of exercise. And that just always stuck with me, that we have these like preconceived notions of how much we need to exercise, how we need to exercise. And it's overcoming some of those barriers.
Doing this is like 30 minutes for up to 5 times a week. So 150 minutes a week is recommended. Is that
for health benefits? For weight loss, if you're only using exercise for weight loss, it's usually recommended that it's like 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise most days of the week. And that is hard. So what you're alluding to is the dietary component, right?
I see.
Right?
I see. Yeah. So, yeah. And I think it goes back to what you said. There's no one size fit all.
Right.
It's finding out what you need.
Yeah. And same with food. Like you should eat food that makes you feel good. And I'm saying a healthy food. A lot of not good food makes us feel good, but find that healthy food that's easy for you.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for that. You've satisfied my curiosity around, obesity and weight loss. So let's talk about epigenetic age acceleration. That's a big word. And I think that's also very critical to your area of research. Are you able to tell us a little bit about that and then the clocks and how they're shaping the future of precision medicine?
Yeah. So I would say, I don't know if they're shaping the future of precision medicine quite yet, but I think
in quotes.
Yes. And they're really new. And so that's what I think is fun about the epigenetic clocks is it's really new, it's easy to assess, and it's easy to explain. So if I'm talking about epigenetic age acceleration, which does sound like a lot, but what it's doing is measuring your body age. And so it's measuring it against your chronological age. So if I encounter Jane or Joe on the street and they've been a smoker, living a sedentary lifestyle, eating an unhealthy diet, then likely if they're 40 years old, perhaps their body is more like 50 years old. And so what these clocks can do is provide that estimate. And again, it's an estimate. It's not, an absolute body age, but it gives you an estimate of that these unhealthy exposures are leading to advanced body aging. But what I'm interested in studying is, can we have interventions like diet and exercise that can reverse that acceleration?
I was going to ask that. Is it going to be like the proverbial clock where you cannot turn back the hands of time?
Maybe turn back your body age, but I think it's hard to say that. So you could completely stop you from aging, but I think it's slowing the aging process. I think there's absolute scientific evidence showing how that can slow aging. There's an interesting Netflix series right now. It's a limited series. It's called You Are What You Eat. And it's a twin study.
Every year.
It's a twin study looking at a vegan versus a healthy carnivore diet. But they receive exercise guidance. They receive dietary guidance. They looked at epigenetic clocks. They look at a whole slew of other things. They looked at the gut microbiome. But it's an interesting, I think it resonates with lay audiences, but it measures some of the things that I measure in my studies. So I find it, in addition to other things, but it's an interesting thing. And in their 8-week intervention, they found that aging was reduced in an 8-week intervention.
So let's talk a little bit about, and thanks for explaining that. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's a harsh reminder of just how we are, what we eat, and what we expose ourselves to, right? And as best as we can, let's modify things we can modify. Because the commonality is that we're all aging, but then we don't want to get that faster than our phenotypical looks, right? How do you foresee the AI shaping the future of obesity research, nutrition, and exercise science? I know AI is that buzzword we've been talking about that is kind of like creeping into every spaces. And I imagine that it's just a matter of time when it's going to creep into your area as well. But how do you foresee that future?
Yeah, I think AI is really interesting and exciting. And I think with a large sample size, you can input many factors. So I'm interested in epigenetics and epigenetic aging, but I would want to input lots of factors. So not just your gut microbiome, your epigenetics, but taking into account your like where you live, and do you have access to, are there sidewalks where you live? Was it safe to walk in your neighborhood? Other socio-demographic factors, cultural factors. So I think what AI allows is to input lots and lots of factors about lots of people and see what rises to the top. But I think that also then that doesn't get to that precision. Yes, it still is informative. And I think there's still value in asking people, or, stopping to ask people, what do you like? What healthy foods do you like to eat? How do you like to move? I think there's still simple things that, AI, how does exercise make you feel? How does, I think there's things that AI is informative, but not
intuitive.
But yes, not intuitive, or not probably going to solve the obesity epidemic.
Epidemic, the way you talked about it, I think I appreciate that, in the sense that it's complementary. It's not replacing anything, but we can't lose that personal touch of just asking people directly, what will make you feel better? What kind of workout would you like to do? Let's look at your immediate environment. How can we modify it to make things easier for you, where you can enjoy moving your body? AI cannot answer that question. You still have to talk to people for that. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. We're delving a little bit. I think we're going to be a little bit all over the place, but we'll wrap up nicely, I promise. So you've you've done a lot, right? Your portfolio is so impressive. Right? How did we get so lucky to have you in Oklahoma? So, and remember you talked about growing up in Iowa, doing a fellowship somewhere in Arkansas. Was it Arkansas or somewhere? And then I know you lived in Colorado for a little bit, and now you're in Oklahoma City. How did you find you? How did you find yourself here? And how has the move been not just on you, but on your family and kids especially?
Yeah, so let's see, I went from Iowa to Missouri to Arkansas to Colorado to Oklahoma.
You love the Midwest, don't you?
And so I think, each move has challenges professionally and personally, but also lots of rewards. So I don't regret anywhere I've moved. I looked at everywhere I've lived really fondly, and I've learned something from where I've lived. I've learned something from colleagues. And then in terms of what brought me here is really, the Health Promotion Research Center where you work as well. I really like the other piece of my research where a future goal is to combine biology and behavior. So I think there's power in looking at both one's underlying biology and accounting for behavior. And so it's really exciting to join a group where people are so well-versed in behavior and health communication and things that I'm not well-versed in. And I really like that complementary expertise. And also I interviewed nationwide, but I was also looking at the need. And so Oklahoma is the third most obese state in the United States. And so I came here to also help people, even if it's just helping a handful of people, but helping people personally or professionally.
Mm-hmm. Who's number one? Is it Mississippi and then Alabama?
I want to say it might be West Virginia.
Oh, yeah. Good God. Okay.
But I could be wrong. So,
oh no, I'm sure it's one of those states. It's just, you're right. West Virginia is one, and then Louisiana, Mississippi, Oklahoma.
Yeah. So, and the health disparities were really,
of course,
convicting to hear from me about. We're part of the Stevenson's Cancer Center. I'm part of the Harold Ham Diabetes Center, and hearing some of these health disparities was really sad for me. But again, if I can help indirectly or directly, that was also convicting for me.
Thank you for that. So let's talk about your family life, right? How has it been like for your kids moving here? I imagine they're of age where they're able to understand, it's a significant move. How has it been like for you? And for those who are navigating moves across country, especially with little ones or not so little ones, what are some survival strategies you like to provide?
Yeah, so once I was starting the in-person interview process, then, I was actually taking my oldest, who was 14 or 15 at the time, he's 16 now, to soccer practice. And I felt really convicted to tell him, but I hadn't talked to my husband yet, so I didn't. And so he's like, yeah, I don't know when the best time is to tell our kids, if you're feeling it, you should just tell them. So I started with my high schoolers. I thought he was going to be the hardest one. He's, in soccer, he had friends, we've lived there for 9 years. He's had the same best friends for all 9 years. And he was like, okay. I was like, do you have questions? No. You're okay with moving? Yeah.
How was it?
So I checked in with him a week later. So I'm like, okay, well, now that you've had time to process what I told you, how are you feeling? He's like, no, I think it'll be good. I'm excited. So then it made it easier for me to tell my other two kids, like his response was really, I think I value open communication professionally and personally. So, explaining reasons why. And it was answering questions and hard questions. And my middle guy was more sad. And so just recognizing that it's okay to feel sad, right? That's okay. That's a natural emotion. I feel sad too. It's hard to leave people that you love and have built relationships with, but it's also exciting to think about building new relationships.
Yeah. That's a good gem right there. Reminding them of, okay, it's okay to feel sad, but then there's also that excitement of starting, and you're not like losing the people you've made friends with. Of course, the physical interaction will be limited, but they're still going to be a part of you, right?
Right.
Okay. So Oklahoma is very different from your last point, which was Colorado. I have been to Colorado twice. I feel like if I lived in Colorado, I'll have a toned body and I'll be a mountain girl because the physical environment is very encouraging, and you see the mountains, you see hiking trails and all that. It's so different from Oklahoma.
It is.
What are some of the, I guess, for those who might be listening to this, we're in place to make some policies. For someone who used to live in Austin, Texas, and moving to Oklahoma City, what I didn't like was just how we don't really place a lot of emphasis on our physical environment. It's not very encouraging to walk around in Oklahoma. You have to drive everywhere. We do have beautiful spaces. They're just not talked about or mapped properly. So what are some of the feedback you like to provide as an outsider who's become an insider now?
Yeah, so I think that maybe was maybe the infrastructure. So in Colorado, in my neighborhood, there was a green belt. And then this, the trail was half a block from my house. That green belt, that trail led into lots of other trail systems. And so it was really easy to bike and run very safely. And so here it was different. And this was the way it was in Little Rock, Arkansas too, where if you're lucky, there's a sidewalk on one side of the street. And then, a few blocks later, it might change to the other side. And so I think that was, but I think you can still overcome those barriers. So practice good exercise etiquette. And so when you're walking, so this is different for walking and running, but you should actually do it on the left side of the street so people can see you. And if it's getting dusk or dawn, I'll take out my phone flashlight so it's easier for cars to see me. A lot of people will roll headlamps, and reflective vests. And so that it just makes you more visible and it's safer then. But there are my family loves Scissortail Park. And we've had lots of visitors come visit us over the holidays. And even though it's freezing cold, we took both our families to Scissortail because it's such an amazing green space and it's beautiful and it's beautifully maintained. And so I think it's a park that's probably underutilized. But my family's loves running there in the summer. There's an amazing spray ground for kids to run around. And I think that's a great green space here in Oklahoma City that I like showing off to other people.
Right. Like Scissortail Park. Yes. I also like the botanical garden as well. And I wish we could have more, especially here in Edmond and in other areas, just showing what we have in the state. It's a beautiful state. We have
Mitch Park is great. And
it's great.
Edmond. Lake Arcadia is great.
Yeah. But it's so bare. Mitch Park is kind of a little bit bare to me. It doesn't have a lot of stuff, compared to Scissortail Park, for example.
Yes,
but it's still a starter. Right?
It is.
Yeah. So how do you balance life and work? I mean, you wear many hats: mom, wife, researcher, daughter, sibling. So many things you do. How do you balance that?
Yeah, some days it's off balance. And I think with time I've gotten better at balancing it. So I think it's letting go of mom guilt. So I can't go to every soccer game or every cross country meet. And I just communicate with my kids hey, you have a 9 p.m. indoor soccer game. Sorry, bud. I'm not going to make that one. And he's like, okay. But I think it comes down to communication, open communication. And I think sometimes we carry guilt we don't need to. I was feeling guilty that I haven't gone to any indoor soccer games yet. And, but it's, once I checked in with my kid, he was fine with it. So it's, I think, a lot of open communication, and then sometimes maximizing if, for soccer, I need to, my kids need to get there early for warm up, but I'll do work during their warm up. I'm not, missing out on anything if I need to, and I think sometimes there are times I need to work more, and then sometimes there's times I need to be a mom more. And so also not be overridden by work guilt either.
Thanks for that reminder. So let's venture into mentoring. You seem to have that passion for it. What do you find most rewarding about mentoring And how do you tailor your mentoring approach to individual needs? Again, drawing back from your talk earlier on about how weight loss isn't one size fits all. So what are your tips and tricks for effective mentoring? And what do you like about mentoring in particular?
Yeah, it's probably really selfish, but mentoring makes me feel good, right? So it's something I
Yes.
enjoy. So the more I do it, the more enjoyment I get. And I guess I've been incredibly fortunate at every stage of my career to have incredibly generous mentors. And so I think it's sort of this idea of like paying it forward. People paid it forward to me so generously that I can't help but want to do the same. And then not only do I get to pay it forward, but I get something back. It makes me feel good to help other people succeed. And then in terms of, you're right, like one size does not fit all for mentoring either. And I've been really fortunate to be able to take like 3 different training programs. So women's leadership training. And then I took one called leadership and team science, and one called co-mentoring, where you took this mentoring program with your mentee. And so in these things, it's, again, I feel like a broken record, but it comes down to communication. So each of us has a different style. So just stopping when I start a mentoring relationship, asking like, what's your preferred form of communication? I'll share what mine is. And like having some established, like, here's my email turnaround, or, just sharing some of these things I've learned to make it more effective. And then if someone values in person, me as a mentor, making in-person meetings then more of a priority for that person.
Yeah, yeah. So on that side, I'm curious to know, I imagine you've mentored so many people across your career. For the ones that stood out, your mentees, what was that thing that you think made them stood out?
So I think, all of my mentees have stood out in different ways. And so, I can't think of like one person. I think there's some mentees that are very easy, and it's because they have the same communication style as me. And then there's other mentees that are different, and those are more challenging. And so those relationships, then I need more feedback from that mentee. So it's seeking out that feedback. Okay, how is this working? Or how we're meeting? Is this working for you? Do we need to change something? So I think it's having more frequent check-ins when someone has a different communication style or a different way they think or communicate. It's checking in a little more often.
Thank you for that communication style. And I liked how you emphasize how the differences you're seeing in them might not necessarily because it's not a fit, it's just they communicate differently. And then how we can bridge the gap in a way to make sure that we're meeting their needs, even though the personality might not be a fit, right? Mm-hmm. That's great. So you're kind of mid-career right now, right? And in talking to just a handful of people, and I'm almost there myself. So this is more of a selfish question. How do you remain motivated and innovative in your research pursuits? So, and how are you navigating that mid-year career slump that is also familiar, especially in the kind of work we do?
So I was just promoted to associate professor. I guess I've been an associate professor now for, thank you, a year and a half or something like that. I was promoted in Colorado. So maybe I haven't felt a slump quite yet. And I also, made this exciting move to Oklahoma where I'm meeting all sorts of new people and collaborators. And so maybe I'm feeling the opposite of like energized. I'm meeting lots of different people who do different types of research and forming new collaborations. Connection is one of, we did that training. And so connection is like my number 2 strength or characteristic of, I forget what it was called, but I love meeting people. So I've done lots of meetings with lots of people in lots of different places and coffee shops, at the art museum, just over Zoom, for a walk. And so I think meeting people and hearing other people's like research origin stories keeps me motivated. And I like meeting people at every stage. So I like hearing people, like students' career, like their origin story. And same with senior people that are more senior than me. So I think for me, I think talking and meeting people and hearing about the research programs keeps me motivated and innovative.
Great. Thank you for that. So it still goes back to communication and being in a form of ecosystem where it's supportive. So that way your ideas are refreshed. Good. I imagine you've had your fair share of challenges, right? Are you able to tell us just one of your most challenging times in academia or related to academia and how you went about navigating that? And I hope it's something that has been resolved, by the way. But if not, we still want to hear.
Yeah, so I remember, and it kind of goes back to work-life balance. I remember I was submitting a KO1 award, and so I was spending a lot of time writing this grant, and it was my first NIH grant. And I remember at Colorado, we had this program called the pre-K program, where your K award is reviewed internally by a mock review study section prior to submitting it. And so I just finished that program and received feedback that I needed to drastically revamp my entire career development program. And my K award was due the next week. And I remember coming home, and my husband and my younger son were sitting on a couch. My younger son was probably around 3 or 4 years old. And my husband's like, Bowen really wants to tell you something. And I thought I was like, oh, what do you want to tell me? I was all excited to hear what he wanted to tell me. And he had this grumpy face on. He's like, I need 4 mommies. And I was like, oh man, I'm like failing him on 4 fronts. He feels like he needs 4 mommies.
Not even like 2, just 4.
4, he needed 4. And in my mind, I was thinking, I just got my feedback from the pre-K. I need to drastically change. I need to like get back on my laptop. And so that was just a hard moment for me professionally and personally to hear that. And, I knew though it was just a season and the season was ending. My grant was due the very next week.
Yeah.
And so now I typically after like a busy grant submission time, like I just have to take some like plan time off. Like you have to be intentional. You have to plan it in advance. But usually my brain is mush like immediately after a large grant submission anyway, that you just need a break to re-energize with your loved ones, to re-energize yourself.
Yeah. Wow. That's a humbling moment. And I imagine you've come a long way since then. But I think it's something our kids might not use the same verbiage, but I imagine that as parents, we do struggle between, being intentional with parenting, but also just the challenges. And because academia is so demanding, I still find myself during vacations having to open my laptop and do some work. And my husband goes, are you not supposed to be, on vacation? I'm like, yeah, I am on vacation. The laptop is still going to stay on sometimes. I want to work on that. I really want to work on that. But yeah, thanks for sharing that vulnerable moment. I guess, I'm done with the hard questions and the soft ones. As we round off, I like to end up with something a bit goofy. Actually, 2 questions. If you could get funded today without having to worry about whether it was going to get scored highly or not, you're going to get the money. What would be your first research? What questions would you like to get addressed through that research grant mechanism?
Yeah, so it's the precision lifestyle. So I'd like to compare tailoring programs to individuals compared to just what we typically, eat less, exercise more, and really truly scientifically comparing that one size fits all to being more thoughtful about how we prescribed exercise and diet.
Okay. Oh, and then before we go, I forgot to ask about your communication piece. Are you able to tell us a little bit about the work you do with the TED-like talks?
Yeah, so it just started here at Oklahoma. So we had our first session last week. So it was a curriculum I co-developed with Susan Johnson at the University of Colorado, and we were the associate directors of a nutrition T32 postdoctoral training program. And she came to me and she's like, hey, one of my colleagues, they're recording like local TED Talks of their researchers. Is this something we should think about doing with our postdocs? And coincidentally, I have the book here. I attended a professional development seminar, and I was given this book called Talk Like TED. And I'd been wanting to read it. It'd just been sitting in my office for a year. and I look at it every day and I was like, oh, I should read that. And so I'm like, well, let's do this book with our postdocs. And so our T32 program bought copies of this book. It's an easy read. It's great. It's really fun to teach and go through. But it's basically this guy that has evaluated TED Talks, the ones that are viewed by millions and millions of people, and interviewed those people and looked at commonalities. And so he boils it down to having an emotional, memorable, and novel elements into your talks. And it makes perfect sense. And I think it helps you connect with your scientific or lay audiences to tell a story, to, present your data in a more compelling way. So that's the Talk Like TED series, is just incorporating some communication strategies that might make your talk with your audience a little more memorable, where they walk away remembering what you said.
How can people tune into that? Like, where can they get more information on how to either offer themselves up as potential speakers or attend one of those sessions?
Yeah, so right now here at the campus, it's being co-offered by the Harold Ham Diabetes Center and the Department of Nutritional Sciences. And so people just had to sign up through a link that was sent out. But it meets in BRC 109 from 3:30 to 4:30 on Wednesdays for the next 7 Wednesdays. So today being one of the 7. But also this book is just available on Amazon. It's called Talk Like TED. It's by Carmen Gallo. And so that's another way that if you can't attend this course, like, anyone can buy the book and read it and watch some TED Talks, which are super fun to watch.
Thank you for that. Finally, if you could have a superpower for a day, what would it be and how would you use it?
You'd be flying. Just want to fly and, see the world in like a day.
It's cheaper that way, though.
Yeah.
All these airplane tickets, not cheap anymore. Well, thank you so much. It's really been fascinating talking with you today, learning about your work and just your passion for what you do with obesity, nutrition, and exercise, and even mentoring upcoming scientists, and your pearl on maintaining a work-life balance, and just your passion for effective communication and shaping your environment in such a way that it's serving its best purpose. It's really been an honor bringing you the podcast, and I thank you for being very forthcoming with your story.
Well, thank you for having me and letting me share.
Yeah, it's your fourth podcast episode ever?
This is my first podcast episode.
How do you feel? I'm always curious to know.
No, I mean, you make it so easy, Mo.
Really?
Yes, you're great to talk to, and you provided the questions in advance. So I had my high schooler read the questions in the car while I was taking to school this morning. And then he was like, oh, I want to hear the answer to this. Because at first had him just like read through the questions. And then then we'd stop at once he wanted to hear the answer too.
Oh, thank you. I mean, this is what we strive to do on the podcast. We want to make sure that we make it easier for people to come share their story, because the goal is to connect, right? Yeah. And if we're not doing that, then we're not meeting our goals. So thank you. And if in that vein, if you have people you like to recommend to us, we're open to talking to any and everybody, their PIs, those who support them. Actually, like to hear more from the support team. I think their stories are those that would definitely add more volume to what we've been talking about on the podcast. So here's a call. If you're listening to this, just send in nominations for your lab members or your research tech, your research staff, your PIs, people you think will make a fantastic contribution to the show. We just want to keep amplifying those voices and talking about translational and clinical research in Oklahoma. Thank you so much, Dr. Borengasser. It was a treat talking to you today, and I'll see you on the other side.
Great.
All right,
thank
everyone.
you.
You're welcome. That was the GROklahoma podcast. Don't forget to share this episode with your loved ones, and I'll be your host next time, and catch you all on another episode of GROklahoma podcast. Bye for now.